skip on the beat.
Now, since this bowling ball is so reactive, it forces me to step very left of the lane. Now, I'm standing on a second dot from the left side. Now, this allows me to have a very large angle when I'm throwing the ball and have it come back to the pocket. It's also important to note that
for the
these
target
type of
on the
oil
lane,
patterns are not
I'm going to be
laid
aiming
on
for the
lanes
very
during
middle
tournaments,
arrow, and that's
because
also
it is
known
too
as a fourth
easy
arrow.
and basic for players
As
to
you
score
watch
on.
in this clip,
Notice how I actually hit the fourth arrow, and look at how violently the ball comes back. Now take a look at this shot. Notice how the ball doesn't come back at the pocket. Now the reason why this happens is because the more balls I throw down the lane, that means that I push the oil in the far section of the lane as well. And as the oil is being pushed back, that means the ball won't have as much of a high-end reaction. Now what this means is that since I missed right of the head pin, that means I move right with my feet, but I will keep the same target on the lanes regarding the arrows. Now this is my next shot. Although it might be a bit off balance, the shot is still good. But watch what happens when the ball comes in too hard. Now, there are 3 phases to the bowling oil pattern. The first phase is when it's fresh. It means when the oil was just put on the lanes, which means that there's a lot of oil on the lanes. The second phase is when the oil starts pushing back, as you can see in the previous shot. And the third phase is when the lane is burnt. Now, when the lane is burnt, it means that the majority of the oil is gone because so many shots were thrown on the lane that the oil is wearing out. Now, the reason why the ball came in more reactive than the previous shots is because I threw so many shots that the lane is actually burnt right now. So the adjustment that I need to make, since I missed left of the head pin, that means I have to move left with my feet. But I keep the same target on the lanes and I also keep my ball speed the same. And after making the adjustment, the shot is still good. And I still have my line. Now let's talk about axis rotation for a bit. Now, although the higher the angle, which means the more hook that you have on the ball, or the greater the chance of a strike, that is not necessarily always the case. There is a quote in bowling, the straighter, the greater. Now, if my ball keeps on reacting too hard, or when my ball doesn't react the way I want it to, so basically if my ball is not performing the way that I expect it to, I can simply adjust my rotation to be a bit straighter. Now, although if I have a straighter roll, the pin carry might not be the best because there's not much angle on it anymore because I'm throwing it's more straighter, right? But since it's more straighter, that means it has less room for error. So in a sense, if I hook the ball, the pin carry is high, but the accuracy is not too high. But if I have a straighter roll, the pin carry won't be that high, but the accuracy will be very precise. And at times in bowling, it is better to take accuracy over pin carry. Now here's just an example of me throwing a straighter ball. Now in slow motion, you can see the release. This is when I hook it. You can see the side rotation on it, but when I throw a straighter ball, you can see the straighter roll. My wrist comes off more clean. Now let's talk about the middle ball. This ball is called the Tropical Breeze. It is a very good beginner ball because it's not too reactive, but it's not too unreactive. Meaning you can still have some angle, but not too much. So it allows players to develop a little hook to begin with. Now with this ball, since it is less reactive than the high road, I cannot throw the same line that I did with the high road, as you can see in this upcoming shot. Notice how the ball doesn't come back as much. That is due to the difference in cover stock and core. The cover stock of the Tropical Breeze is a very, how should I say this? It's a very smoother material, meaning it's not as grippy as the rubbery substance that the R2S has. And the core it's not much of a core, it's just like a little light bulb, but there's not much deformation, meaning there's not much of an unbalance in weight, meaning the ball won't come back as strong as the High Road. Now since the Tropical Breeze is less reactive than the High Road, that means I have to move right with my feet and right with my target. Instead of aiming for the fourth arrow, I am now going to be aiming for the third arrow to the right. As you can see in this video, notice how I hit my target and the ball reacts the way I want it to. Now let's talk about the final ball, the bright blue ball. This ball is known as a plastic ball because it goes dead straight no matter how many revs you put on it. However, if the lane conditions are dry enough, this ball can manage to hook the entire lane. This ball is primarily used for a spare ball. The reason being is because the thing is there is no core. It's just a tiny little bulge, which just simply adds on to the balance of weight. And as for the material, it's in its name, it's a plastic ball. Meaning the ball just slides through the surface of the lane, and since plastic is not much of a grippy substance, the ball tends to just slide for the majority of its journey down the lane. That is why this ball is primarily used for spares, as when you're shooting spares, the straighter the ball, the greater chance of converting it. Now watch closely as I throw this spare ball the same route as I did with my High Road. Notice how it never came back. Now since I missed right of the head pin, and I know how less this ball reacts, I'm going to move approximately 15 to 20 boards right with my foot. As I do so, I will also aim for the second arrow to the right, because I know that since the ball is a plastic ball, I know that it will slide and not hook as much. Now let's talk about sports patterns for a while. So this pattern is called the Badger, and it is 52 feet in length, and it's one of the most difficult patterns in PBA Tour. Now the reason why is because there's such a large volume of oil in the middle and outer section of the lane. So if you throw your ball on the right, there's so much oil that your ball will never come back. However, the thing is with this pattern is that you cannot have a large arc on this lane, which means that you can't hook the ball a lot. So only straight lines are permitted, because if you try to hook the ball, if you try to swing it through the entire lane, the ball will never come back and it will just go in the gutter. Now, although the straighter the greater, it's very difficult to maintain a very straight line with this pattern because you have to be dead on with your target. If you miss an inch off of your target meaning your arrow. So if I'm aiming for the fourth arrow and I miss an inch off, my ball will never get a strike, and it's just guaranteed unless I get really lucky. So that is why this pattern is mostly used in the tournaments, because it is the most challenging and it provides the most competitive atmosphere. Now here's a shot on the Badger pattern, and look how straight the roll is. Now this pattern is called the Wolf pattern, and although it is the most shortest pattern, it's also known as one of the most hardest, following along with the Badger. Now the reason why this one's so hard is because if you try to have a large arc, it is so dry in the far sections of the lane that the ball will overhook. Well, what overhooking means is basically it hooks so much that it misses left of the head pin instead of right. Now in order to battle against this oil pattern, what you can do is you can either throw a very reactive ball like the High Road that I showed you guys before, and throw an end over end roll and play a tight line. Now what I mean when I say playing a tight line means that the line that you're playing on the lane, it doesn't require much rotation and it doesn't require much angle and hook, but it is still sufficient enough to give you strikes consistently. Now your other option is to find a very low end reaction ball, which can either be urethane or the plastic ball that I showed earlier. You can use that ball and hook the entire lane, because it is dry enough that the plastic ball can actually have a very high-end reaction. This is a shot on the wolf pattern, and notice how large the angle is. Now let's take a look at my style. As I start off, my back is very straight. My eyes are staring down at the targets, which are the arrows. And you notice I have a little hop in my step, and I'll go into more detail on that later. The ball is cupped in my wrist, I have a good slide, and I have a good follow through. Now let's break that into pieces. So in the first stage of my approach, my shoulders are squared to the front, my eyes are facing forward, and I have the ball firmly placed in my hand. On my second step, I start to put the ball in front of me, which begins my momentum swing. Now this is where things get really interesting as a two-hander. So since I'm two-handed, I have a hop in my step, but not all two-handers have a hop. It's very optional, but it just feels natural to me. Now what this hop does is that it transfers most of my weight and kinetic energy into my left foot, which is the foot that I finish off of. And since I slide with that foot, I convert all that energy into my release as well. And I'll explain why a foot slide is more effective than a foot plant in the later stages of this video. Now if I don't hop, my ball speed will not be as fast. Now here's a very interesting fact about bowling, is that the reason why players have such high ball speed is because that they move their feet very fast as well. About 70% of the ball speed is created from the movement of the legs, and the 30% is from the rest of the body, mainly the arm. Now as you can see here, I'm about to release the ball. My left shoulder is still pointing towards the pins, my left foot is beginning its sliding process, and my head is still focused on the target to ensure a higher percentage of accuracy. As I release the ball, my knee is bent, my slide is complete, but my head is still facing towards the target. Now here's just a brief little video of me having a foot plant as opposed to a foot slide. Now there are multiple reasons why you'd want to have a foot slide aside from a foot plant, because as you're taking steps to the approach to the foul line, you're creating more and more momentum, which means more inertia. Now if you have a slide, you are sliding into the ball, which means you are using all of your momentum, all of your inertia. You're going to slide it off, pass it onto the fingertips of your fingers, and pass it off to the ball, which creates an optimum ball speed. However, if you have a foot plant, you are completely negating your inertia and your momentum. As you have a foot plant, you just stop wherever you are, you cut off your energy, you throw off your balance, and not only do you throw off your balance, but you also have a high risk of injury. Because since you're having a foot plant, as you're stopping all that energy is actually transferred to your legs, which puts immense pressure on them. And not only does it ruin your balance, but it also ruins your ball speed. Because since you're hurting your left leg so much, and since you have very few energy left, you will have a harder time throwing the ball at a higher ball speed. I'm just going to show you guys a video of my friend Chris bowling one-handed, and I want you guys to focus on his slide. Notice how smooth it is, and look at how fast the ball is. Now remember, the majority of the ball speed is created from the legs, and not just the arms.